Cory Booker and Alex Padilla have a new bill out. They want to require CBP and ICE officers to have legible IDs, and they don't want CBP or ICE officers covering their faces.
Well, they wouldn't be saying that if they didn't hate our country.
Did you hear the president today? Do you want to talk about shit that ain't true?
Shit that ain't true. I love this country. I love our democratic values. I love our Constitution.
But we've seen demagogues and authoritarian leaders from McCarthy to Trump try to say, if you disagree with me, you're unpatriotic. If you disagree with me, you're un-American. Well, to me, actually, dissent is very American, especially when people are abusing power.
Right now, the focus is clearly on Los Angeles, around immigrants' rights, but the groundwork that they've laid to squash dissent can happen anywhere in the country on any issue that he cares about.
And that's what worries me right now. If you can abduct people off of streets in violation of due process laws, that is a threat to our due process laws as American citizens. But this, to me, there's a level of making this even more dangerous. We saw what happened in Minnesota, where a guy who was dressed as a police officer came with ill intent and murdered people. And now we have folks that are roaming our streets who are saying they're police officers, but we have no way of identifying the truth of who they are. They're not wearing their badges outside of their vests. And that is inherently dangerous.
Exactly. You don't just take somebody's word for it. That's what accountability is all about. That's why I say, for both the safety of community and the safety of federal agents, this makes all the sense in the world. It's required of other federal law enforcement agencies, just not ICE. It's like a big loophole that we're trying to fix. And we know that these policies work. State law enforcement has been required to do this for a long, long time. Local law enforcement has had to do this for a long, long time. Why not ICE?
But I think that a point is really important to make. Every other law enforcement agency has to identify themselves. And that's not some kind of charity to the person that's being arrested. That is for public safety, so that you know when that person is coming to your door, approaching you on the street, and they're not properly identifying themselves, you are asking for a conflict that can put law enforcement in danger.
And sadly, that's, I think, a big part of what Donald Trump wants. He wants to escalate the tensions. He wants the divisiveness. He wants the chaos. He wants the fear. He wants the terror. Look what they did in MacArthur Park a couple of days ago. Iconic park in Los Angeles, where they had not just dozens and dozens of ICE agents come in, full tactical gear, military-grade weapons, many on horseback, in a venue that just minutes before their arrival was hosting a summer day camp. Right? Kids are out of school. It's a summer day camp. And after all these theatrics, which I'm sure generated a lot of social media content for their platforms, 0 detentions, 0 arrests. It was all for show and to sow even more fear in those communities.
For ICE not to do what every other law enforcement agency has to do, which is identify themselves.
And there's a whole other dimension of this too. You mentioned the incidents in Minnesota. There's already other documented cases in California and North Carolina, so many places in between, of people impersonating ICE agents as their way in to commit burglary, robbery, sexual assault.
So there are documented cases where people impersonate ICE agents in order to commit crimes.
Yes.
And we're telling our ICE agents, don't worry about it. You do not have to identify yourself.
Yeah. So this is riddled with problems, riddled with risk, riddled with danger.
And so our bill is trying to actually protect ICE agents, protect the public. If you're doing federal law enforcement, like the ATF, like the FBI, you have to identify yourself when you're doing your duties as a way to protect the citizen as well as protect the officer. That sounds like something that's pretty patriotic to me.
Pretty patriotic, pretty common sense, not just what we think is a good idea, it's proven policy.
Right. There have been so many people in American history, demagogues and wannabe despots, that tried to tell you, in order to keep you safe, we're going to take away some of the basic fundamental rights, that you're going to have to trade your rights for your safety. That is really dangerous. We have seen it time and time again. We can actually uphold the law, enforce the law by also upholding people's rights.
Look, you and I both sit on the Judiciary Committee. We know that sometimes it's a delicate, even a difficult balance between civil liberties, our fundamental rights, and public safety. We don't have to choose. They're not mutually exclusive. We have to maintain both.
So how do you feel when someone who is violating our democratic principles, violating our fundamental rights, calls you un-American?
Yeah. It's their guilt shining through. They're the ones that are un-American by trying to undermine our fundamental rights for their political agenda.
Right. In other words, the guy who is calling other Americans indiscriminately un-American, that in and of itself, given our history, is probably one of the most unpatriotic, un-American things that you can do. Right. As one of my heroes, James Baldwin, says, I love America more than any other country. That's why I reserve the right to criticize her perpetually. And I'll add this, especially when a leader is doing something wrong. Speaking truth to power is one of the best parts of our American tradition.
Right.